While the focus on our channel is more about news and the current situation, Lithuania's old M113 fleet of vehicles is perhaps breaking away from this trend and looking at something more historical. But while these old tracked armored personnel carriers, or APCs, are on their way out and will eventually be fully replaced, they are definitely still part of the Lithuanian armed forces at the time we're making this video, so we should definitely take a look at them. At the same time, it also makes for a good English language historical record of this chapter of Lithuania's land forces. And so in today's video, we take a look at Lithuania's acquisition of the M113 APC. Doing our best to search up old articles in the Lithuanian language, we were able to find this Ministry of Defense announcement from 2006. Translated to English, it says that the Lithuanian Armed Forces purchased 200 M113A2 armored vehicles and 50 M113 service kits required for their repair from the German Armed Forces at the end of 2004. Before these armored vehicles were put into operation, a German repair company was selected through a tender where the armored vehicles were maintained, inspected, and repaired. The first 85 armored vehicles were delivered to the Lithuanian Armed Forces warehouses at the end of 2005. Variants delivered included infantry, mortar, medical, command, and repair armored vehicles. The Ministry of Defense goes on to say that the armored vehicles would be equipped with maintenance and operational tools, mortar equipment, and that communication equipment would be installed before being transferred to units. A German repair company converted 8 infantry fighting vehicles into repair vehicles, and these were equipped with special equipment, a winch and/or a crane to be more specific. 4 of the armored vehicles, which have a winch and a crane, were named Skruzdele, which means little ant, while the other 4, which have only a crane, are named Giogas, which means grasshopper. Special mounting points for tools and accessories were installed inside and outside the armored vehicles. Additional seating was also installed, as were mounting points for radio communication equipment. The newly modified armored vehicles were tested, and technical documentation and training material for the operation of armored vehicles were prepared for them. In the infantry armored vehicles, protection for the gunner was constructed on the outside, and fuel tanks were moved to the outside for the safety of the transported soldiers. And then, upon delivery to Lithuania, armored vehicles were tested on a 10-kilometer test drive. Unfortunately, we couldn't find a monetary amount associated with this deal. Maybe, given the timing, it was a generous gift to celebrate Lithuania's ascension to the NATO military alliance. But jokes aside, our guess is that Germany was phasing them out and sold them to Lithuania for next to nothing, similar to British and Austrian forces selling CVRT and M109 fleets to Latvia, respectively. But again, without finding any solid information, that's just our guess. Jumping forward by 10 years to 2016, the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense signed a deal with Germany to purchase 168 M577s. Command, indirect fire support, medical evacuation, and training variants of the M577 were purchased to fill in the shortages of armored vehicles in the Lithuanian land force. Decommissioned from the German military, these vehicles were said to have been acquired for 1.6 million euros. And then, 2 years later, in 2018, 22 M577s were upgraded. These vehicles were to be command and control vehicles for the used PZH-2000 howitzers the Lithuanian Armed Forces acquired from Germany. In a press release, a ministry spokesperson stated, "The main work of upgrading the armored personnel carriers was carried out on Lithuania. Therefore, part of the resources used to upgrade M577s was received by Lithuanian enterprise." It was noted that by agreement of the companies, the German enterprise gave the Lithuanian enterprise the maintenance technology needed to carry out the work. According to Alexander Eriksson, representing Flensburger Fahrzeugbau Gesellschaft, it was the first time the industrial M577/M113 armored personnel carrier maintenance technology was used in Lithuania. All 22 upgraded M577 armored personnel carriers were transferred in 2019 to the General Romualdas Giedraitis artillery battalion used in Rukla. The total value of the upgrading contract was said to amount to roughly 1.5 million euros. It was added that later on, a new command and control system would be integrated. The M113 as a platform is old. It entered service with the US Army in 1960 and primarily played the role of battle taxi, transporting troops to the front line to engage in dismounted combat. According to the Lithuanian military's website, these are the details of the M113s in the forces. The M113 has driver and command hatches on top and a hydraulically lowered platform with doors at the rear. The armored vehicle weighs about 10.4 tons and can accommodate about 12 soldiers and a driver. A technically prepared M113 can swim with the help of tracks with a quote-unquote swimming speed of 6 kilometers an hour. With technological improvements in weaponry as well as the types of warfare we've seen over the past few decades, the M113 has mostly been seen as obsolete, a vehicle with insufficient armor and a cramped and claustrophobic interior for passengers. Speaking with one Lithuanian military veteran, he tells me that riding in such vehicles was noisy and bumpy and muddy/dusty. He goes on to say, "It was cramped inside. Armor we all knew wouldn't save us anyway, but hey, beats walking." We're pretty sure any veteran or active service member around the world who has experienced these old vehicles would say something similar. According to Wikipedia, a source that we try not to rely on too heavily, the Lithuanian military continues to hold on to many of these M113s and M577s. So, while some of the country's combat units are operating the newer Vilkas 8x8 with a 30mm cannon on top, there are others still using the older equipment. We know for sure that Lithuania had decided to transfer many of these old APCs to Ukraine. In 2022, a Defense Ministry announcement said that 12 units of M113 were transferred to the Ukrainian army, 10 units of 120mm self-propelled mortars, and 2 units of fire control armored vehicles. The announcement added that Lithuania had already transferred a total of 62 M113 armored personnel carriers for different purposes to Ukraine. And then there was another donation of an undisclosed number of M577s in April 2024. A few months later, in June 2024, 14 M113s were donated. The 14 vehicles were transferred on a non-reimbursable basis as a contribution to the Ukraine Demining Coalition, a coalition which Lithuania co-leads with Iceland to strengthen the demining capabilities of the Ukrainian armed forces. A few months later, in September 2024, Lithuania donated more M113s, although the quantity was again not disclosed. Several media sources also noted that more M113s were donated to Ukraine in November. And then, in early 2025, Lithuania announced that it had donated M113 spare parts to Ukraine. If you are counting, that's at least 88 vehicles confirmed. If including announcements with undisclosed numbers, we're guessing that over 100 have already been donated, if not more. And so, while the vehicle is mostly considered obsolete, we can only hope that they are better than nothing on the battlefields of Ukraine. Now, at the time of making this video, Lithuania's Ministry of Defense has announced plans for 2 mechanized infantry battalions equipped with IFVs, or infantry fighting vehicles. We are quite certain that these will be the tracked Swedish CV-90, although no deal has been officially signed yet. Per a March 19th social media post, the Defense Ministry announced that representatives of Lithuania had participated in a CV-90 shooting demonstration. The post stated, "The Ministry of National Defense, in order to modernize and strengthen the capabilities of the Lithuanian armed forces, is actively working on the assessment of possibilities to purchase the CV-90 tracked infantry fighting vehicle, which is widely used by NATO. In order to evaluate the characteristics and suitability of the CV-90, a delegation of representatives of the National Defense System took part in shootings of this infantry fighting vehicle in Sweden. The event provided a practical opportunity for Lithuanian defense experts to see and evaluate the CV-90 platform up close. The CV-90's versatility, firepower, mobility, and advanced systems were showcased in a demonstration organized by manufacturer BAE Systems. The manager of the CV-90 project at Lithuania's Defense Resources Agency stated, "We are looking for a reliable, modern and mobile tracked infantry fighting vehicle that could meet the strategic needs of our army in the coming years. The CV-90 is a highly valued platform in the alliance, and this demonstration gave us the opportunity to assess its compatibility with our specific operational requirements and to make sure of its reliability." We'll definitely be putting out a video on Lithuania's CV-90 plans in the future. We're really just waiting for that deal to be signed and made official. So it sounds like Lithuania will create new battalions and have these be based on the CV-90. Thus, it seems to us like they won't really be replacing the M113s and M577s like some would assume. Some media have stated that the wheeled 4x4 JLTVs will be replacing the M113s, but this is hard to believe as these vehicles are quite different in terms of size and capacity. We know that the Vilkas has replaced the M113 with some of Lithuania's infantry battalions, but with several donations to Ukraine being undisclosed, we're simply not sure how many of the old tracked vehicles are left in the military, if any. We can tell you that the M113 is still listed on the Lithuanian Armed Forces website as equipment being operated. The website, however, was last updated in January 2024. And so, what do you think of the M113 and M577? Do these vehicles still have a place in modern warfare? Let us know by leaving a comment.